Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday night, May 8th, 7 p.m. and Council is having a series of committee meetings tonight. The Committee of the Whole, then followed by 4 other committees. And we do have a slight modification. We have one additional item under Committee of the Whole. But our first presentation will be about the NOPEC gas aggregation. And I believe we have Eddie Smith here, who is a director of our SOPEC, our Southeastern Ohio Energy Consortium. So thank you, Eddie, for coming tonight.
Yeah. Thank you, President Nisley. I'm happy to be here. My name is Eddie Smith. I serve as the executive director of SOPEC. And I think I'm supposed to say if we could go to the presentation. There we are. Okay. So I'm going to try to be really brief tonight, but I wanted to just provide some of the necessary facts that I think should be considered with the SOPEC, NOPEC gas aggregation program. I'm going to do this really briefly. I'm going to touch 5 points. We're going to look at historic SCO pricing, natural gas consumption data, specifics on the partnership with NOPEC, the NextERA GreenERA program, and then next steps for Athens City. And I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes. So this chart just shows the historic SCO pricing in the Columbia gas territory in Ohio. This is the price that a consumer would pay for a CCF of natural gas if they were not participating in aggregation. And you can see that if you go back about 3 years ago, in January 2014, it was close to 70 cents per CCF. If we come now to the present, it's closer to 50 cents per CCF, or $5 per MCF. On average, this price has been declining at about 2 cents, or 2/100ths of a penny per CCF every month for the past 3 years. So it is trending downward, yeah.
CCF?
That's 100 cubic feet. So picture a cubic foot of gas, 100 of those is 50 cents. Or 1,000 of those is $5. That price per 100 cubic feet has been declining at about 2/100ths of a cent every month for the past 3 years. So the market is trending downward. This graph shows the residential natural gas consumption in Athens County. The majority of this gas consumption is in Athens City. Athens City has the bulk of all the natural gas accounts, residential accounts in Athens County. As you can see, very briefly looking at it, 2016 showed the lowest consumption compared to any of the 4 prior years. There was only 1 month in which 2016 consumed more gas than any of the prior years, and that's after adjusting for weather. If you combine both of these types of information, the SCO, the price that people pay per gas, times the amount of CCFs of gas that are being consumed, you could monetize the value of Athens City's gas consumption on the residential side. And as you can see, in 2014, Athens City spent about $4.4 million on residential gas consumption. That declined to about $2.7 million in 2015. And the decline was due to 2 factors. The first was there was lower demand because weather was a little bit warmer, and then also because demand was lower, the price fell. And so 9% of the reduced expenditure came from the reduced demand, and then 30% came from the reduced price. So I just want to throw those out because they'll be handy in a moment when we look at the GreenERA program, but I think it's helpful to have a perspective on what we're spending right now on natural gas. So this partnership we're describing with NOPEC, if you're not aware, NOPEC represents 500,000 electric utility accounts in Northeast Ohio, and they represent 300,000 natural gas accounts in Northeast Ohio. They are by far the absolute largest governmental aggregation program in the entire country. And that gives them a lot of influence at the state level when talking about energy utility policy and dealing with AEP, dealing with First Energy, dealing with big companies. SOPEC has a seat at the table at NOPEC. SOPEC is a member of the NOPEC Council of Governments. And if we move forward with natural gas aggregation, Athens City actually gets a really democratic voice in NOPEC. Athens City joins one of the 15 members of the board of directors of NOPEC. Again, NOPEC represents 200 communities, but Athens City gets a direct seat on the board of directors of NOPEC. And I think that's really helpful for being able to advocate for Athens and for Southeast Ohio with the state legislature. The NextERA GreenERA program was launched. When I spoke with the director of NOPEC and with some folks from NextERA, we were really interested in trying to find any type of biogas, any type of renewable natural gas that's being produced and put into a pipeline somewhere that could be being consumed by Athens City residents. They looked over the entire country. There's nowhere that they could identify where biogas, any type of renewable gas source, is being commodified for aggregation. However, they did come up with the GreenERA program, and the GreenERA program offers competitive SCO pricing while also directing 20% of the total revenues that go to NextERA towards renewable generation projects, new projects that are utility scale renewable generation. That means about $10 million a year of NOPEC expenses are being directed towards the construction of renewables, and that would be about $700,000 for Athens City, again, going back to what we know about what Athens City tends to consume for natural gas. So next steps are to authorize SOPEC to act as an agent on behalf of the city. Again, Athens City is already a member of the SOPEC Council of Governments. We represent the city's interests with electric utility services for residences and small businesses. If that is passed, the next step after that would be to hold 2 public hearings to review the NOPEC plan of governance and operations for their natural gas program, and then finally to approve the NOPEC plan of governance and operations. So that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of council members?
I have one.
Yes, Councilmember
Thank you,
Cochran.
President Isley. I had a question that I didn't ask last time when Chuck Kuiper was here, and that is in regards to the NextERA program. I'm a little puzzled as to why we would be putting 20% of our proceeds into a program that's benefiting a nationwide program rather than focusing it on something local like the solar program that was meant to be a part of the SOPEC consortium at its foundation, and we haven't heard much about that in a while. The planned solar array that was going to feed into our electric aggregation program, but maybe you could speak briefly to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to argue that we should direct dollars away from our region for the construction of renewables. There is not a mechanism that exists right now to direct those dollars towards regional renewable development through a gas aggregation program. Athens City, again, by serving on the board of directors of NOPEC, has a voice at the table and can advocate that some of these projects be in Southeast Ohio. But there is nothing in the charter of that trust fund that would allow, that would specify these dollars have to be spent in the area. But I guess it's about the best program that we have available right now. But I agree, it should be more localized, and it's not.
Thanks.
Councilmember McGee.
Thank you, President Isley. Eddie, 2 questions, really. One, play devil's advocate for me and tell me why we shouldn't do it.
Gas markets are volatile. We could lock in at a competitive price and the market could shift. And it's challenging to forecast what's going to happen in some of these energy markets. NOPEC has a history of only doing 90-day contracts to avoid any sort of long-term exposure to something like that. So I think the maximum exposure that the city would face would just be a couple months, and then they'd renegotiate at whatever the market was bearing at that point. But that's really about the only downside I see to something like that.
If I could ask a second question
Sure.
real quick. Do you have any control over pipelines?
No, so aggregation's just on the sort of the retail side on purchasing energy commodities, nothing with the transportation of them. That still falls back to the utility, and that again is where SOPEC's really working hard to lobby the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio and change things on the utility distribution side also. But this program's distinct and separate from anything that would be involving the utility.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Fall.
I know that there's been talk about re-regulating the different power energy markets. And what is your how would that might be another one of those devil advocate questions. How would that potentially impact both these aggregates?
Yeah, if the utilities were successful at re-regulating Ohio's retail electric market or gas market, it would mean really bad news for consumers. Aggregation saved, just on the residential electric side, aggregation has saved about $15 billion for consumers over the last 5 years. So that's $15 billion that got to be spent on mortgages and all sorts of other good things instead of being spent on utility bills.
Right.
But the utilities have not really been lobbying for re-regulation of the gas side. They've been arguing for re-regulation of the electric side.
Okay.
And most recently, they've backed off from doing this because organizations like NOPEC and SOPEC have worked hard to lobby our state leaders, both on the executive side and on the legislative side, and the utilities have backed off now. So I'm optimistic that re-regulation is not coming, and even if it did, it wouldn't be happening on the natural gas side.
Okay. I find it ironic that the Republican powers they have been talking about re-regulating a market that they did unregulate, and then our people are actually competing, and the electric companies are not liking it. It's humorous in a weird way. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Executive Director Smith for being here and sharing again and covering a few more details, specifically going into SOPEC's presence versus NOPEC and the advocacy and the presence that you acknowledge that we would have if you're involved and engaged with this process, giving a seat at the table, essentially. And I appreciate you emphasizing that, and I think that's beneficial for us to hear as well. Are there any other benefits perhaps along those lines too that you're thinking of that you're able to expand upon?
Yeah. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the recent AEP rate case, the fixed variable rate case, but it would raise the flat portion of everyone's bill by about 120% above where it's at right now. Oh. And yeah, that was being pushed for pretty hard by not just AEP but other utilities also. And SOPEC was there in the PUCO hearings. We testified against that, and when I was there testifying against that, I had the authority to say I'm speaking on behalf of 14,000 electric utility accounts in Southeast Ohio right now. This would be terrible news for them, and so this would, give us even more influence, even more legitimacy at the state level to say, we're also speaking on several thousand natural gas accounts too. So right now we don't speak on behalf of natural gas, and I think we could and should be. So yeah, that's one other thing I would add to that.
Thank you.
And I just have a few follow-up questions on the sequence and the timing. So you had a slide that gave a fairly good description.
We could go to the
If we can go back to
presentation.
the presentation again. Okay. So as I understand, and I think that, and the law director has looked at this too, that there would be two ordinances that are separate with two public hearings in between that. So the first ordinance authorizes SOPEC to act as the agent. And I just want to confirm that this is the order or the sequence in which it needs to happen, that ordinance happens first, authorizing, then we hold the public hearings, and then we adopt the NOPEC plan of governance and operations.
Yes, I just spoke with our attorney the other day on this, and the first legislation that has to be passed is legislation authorizing SOPEC to represent the city with the NOPEC gas program.
Okay.
Then after that, two public hearings are held. They can both be the same day. We did this for Somerset in the fall. We had one at 9 a.m. and one after 5 p.m. for people who couldn't make it to the morning one. But it's just a chance for the community to come and review the plan of governance and operations, and if they have any concerns, raise those. And then after that, council would pass the ordinance approving the plan of governance and operations.
And those public hearings, as you say, so that people could learn more about it, respond to it, see if they voice any concerns they might have. And is it then Ohio Revised Code that requires this?
Yes.
Or, okay, because I see in the plan of governance, it says the Ohio law, so is it that 49, the 2001 law?
I don't know if it's that specific law, but it is
Okay.
required, yes.
Okay, section 4929.26, okay, okay. And then, I guess then my other question is that the timeline on how we proceed with this. Are we thinking June and August? And, you know, I guess it's probably a question to both administration and to you, Mr. Smith, about an ideal timeline that would work, but that also is, I think, needs to be respectful of the process and the public hearings as well, so that the public can know about this.
You know, my thoughts on that, if I may, is to start bringing, at least bring the first ordinance through, bring it up on Monday night and start the process. What has typically happened with council meetings is that we can have the public hearings just before council meets. Start them at 6 o'clock for anyone who wants to comment. And again, what is available for the public, for the hearing is, again, the NOPAC plan of governance and operations that anyone can look through. We can also put that, have it out there on the city's website where someone could peruse through it on that as well. It's lengthy. But that not constituting the public hearing. The public hearing, again, have 2 consecutive council meetings. It could be before the first reading and the second. It could be second and before the third reading.
I think the ordinance to authorize has to happen first. That's, I think, if I'm understanding the sequence correctly, so we can't have the public hearings.
Been passed.
Or you're talking about the public hearings before the SOPEC? I'm not sure
The ordinance that you want up next Monday,
Right.
then you want to run the public hearings during that.
We can. I don't think they necessarily have to be locked to a particular ordinance, or do they?
Well, the public hearings are not to review SOPEC acting as an agent of the city. They're just to approve the plan of governance and operations for an aggregation program that people would be automatically enrolled in.
So it's all the same topic, but it's kind of a different, the public hearings are actually to look at the plan of governance. And the first one is to authorize. So it's almost like our grant process where the city authorizes this, or the council authorizes the city to apply for a grant. And then we might, you know, so we're authorizing in this sense. Okay.
If we go back to the slides, though.
Sure, the slide again, the presentation, and I sense that there's a comment from the Service Safety Director who might be able to clarify all of this for us.
Just inquiry actually to the council clerk that public hearing notices usually are they 30 days or they 2
This
weeks?
only has to be 10.
10.
Yeah. We've
So
always
we-
gone by the rule of 2 consecutive weeks of.
So we wouldn't be able to have the notice, the public hearing, until we've done a public notice with 10 days
10
out
days.
there. So we couldn't, it would be 2 weeks out that
So it could be
we'd
second reading.
have it. The
First
second
is
reading,
Monday.
correct, yeah, it could be the second reading, okay. Now,
And I just wanted to say, there's really no pressing urgency on this. I, wanted to be transparent in that consumption's extraordinarily low in the summer, unlike electric markets. So, the value of taking our time, there's no need to rush on this.
okay,
So you can see there's nothing being used.
okay. All right, I think, are there any other questions or comments? All right. And I think I'm sensing a general interest from council members that this looks like a good opportunity. Because our ultimate goal is that we're wanting to do is reduce the amount that consumers pay for natural gas. So this helps that happen. Okay.
And again, as Chuck Kuiper said last week, there's never a guarantee on that. So I always want to be upfront with that, but we would make every effort to. Yes.
Right, okay. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Okay, I appreciate that. All right, and we do have a second brief item on the Committee of the Whole. Councilmember Fall, did you want
Great,
to speak
thank
to
you.
that, please?
I will be placing before council on Monday a resolution worded to Rob Portman outlining our concerns about the Trump Care plan that passed the House. So people have interesting statistics, they can shoot them to me. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the Planning and Development Committee. Councilmember Fall,
Thank
Sherry.
you. We have tonight Mary Nally from the CFI, or otherwise known as the Community's Food Initiative. Great. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you so much
We
for
always look
having me.
actually forward to this,
Great,
all the neat
so
things you
glad.
do.
So I do have a presentation, if we can pull that up, please.
Here we go. It's on the desktop here for you. There we go.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. My intent tonight is to give you an overview of our impacts in last year in 2016 and tie that to what our current goals are for this year and looking into the future. So as you know, our mission continues to be to protect the right of everyone in Southeast Ohio to have access to fresh, healthy, local food, abiding by our values of community and culture, justice, education and empowerment, and boy, howdy, collaboration, because we really need a lot of folks to help make all of these programs have the impact that they do in our community. So I'll begin by just touching on our community gardens program. We still continue to manage 5 community gardens across Athens County, 2 of which are in the city of Athens on the east side and south side. They have shown great interest and participation. Both the east side and south side gardens are always our first to fill up in each spring. And at the East, South Side, and Nelsonville Gardens, we've allocated sections to grow food with teams of volunteers, which are called donation station garden plots. So we're growing additional food for our donation station program, which is then harvested and distributed out to area food pantries and agencies through that program. And last year we saw an additional 565 pounds of food grown from those sites. With our Garden and Culinary Workshop series, I'd have to say not too much has changed here. We're continuing to do a series every year, usually between 25 and 40 workshops. One thing that was distinct about 2016 that we plan on continuing is more partnerships with local farms and food producers, doing a lot of on-site workshops. We've noticed, as you might imagine, that it's a lot of fun to get to visit a local farm, get a tour, as well as the education, whether that's learning their season extension techniques, how to tap trees and make your own maple syrup, or things of that nature. Our donation station program has had significant growth in distribution in 2016. Originally, for the past couple years, we've just been serving Athens and Morgan County. 2015, we added Vinton. In 2016, we added Meigs County and Washington County. So we're now in 5 Southeast Ohio counties, serving pantries, soup kitchens, and social service agencies in those communities that are addressing their community's food insecurity rates. That's been very exciting, although it has added an additional challenge that we're addressing this year and making plans for the future to make sure that we're keeping up strong supplies to meet our increased demand as we serve a greater portion of the region. So you'll probably hear promotions this year about our Harvest Hotline program, which we've had, but we're trying to get more farmers engaged in giving us a call when they have excess produce in their fields that we can harvest with our volunteers, as well as getting individuals signed up to grow a row, to take a pledge to grow additional food in their gardens. And they get a few little perks for doing that, and then that also gets distributed through the program. Another aside is that You may have heard me talk about donation station development in other communities. That's been something that I've been working on, basically replicating this program for other communities to own. And just this past Saturday at the Chillicothe Farmers Market, the Ross County Donation Station was started. So it's been a long haul, but we're very excited. And that's a really wonderful partnership with several organizations, including Integrated Services and Operation Hope. Alongside the donation station is, of course, the Discovery Kitchen, where we're going to pantries and agencies, helping coach people on how to use seasonal ingredients, as well as addressing their health needs through the food that they're eating. And we continue to have an extremely strong and very beneficial partnership with the Athens County Public Library System, who also hosts these Discovery Kitchen tasting events in all the library branches twice a year. So that's really helped us connect with the general public much better and helping more people know what to do with local food. Our school garden programs are continuing what they've always done in terms of providing resource and technical support to schools, and our emphasis right now moving forward is developing school garden curriculum that meets Ohio State's testing standards to reduce that barrier that a lot of teachers face, and also provide lesson plans for AmeriCorps service members that are often working in those schools with activities that they can use, whether it's for official education or what I'm calling now covert education, where kids might learn things without even knowing it while they're having fun in those gardens. The Ridge and Hollow Seed Alliance is our fledgling seed company or seed enterprise based on 13 years of work with our regional seed savers across Athens County and our neighboring counties. We're really, really thrilled to be, I feel like, really getting our feet underneath us with this program. We are partnering with local seed savers, contracting with them as growers, purchasing their locally saved open pollinated plant variety seeds, and then retailing them through area businesses in Athens County as well as in Fairfield County and Lancaster right now. And we did just recently receive funding to partner with professors from Ohio University, Ohio State University, and Miami University to host technical seed saving workshops across the state to hopefully grow our network, develop a statewide Seed Savers Alliance, and address some of the antiquated state laws that we have toward seed saving and seed libraries and swaps and things of that nature. So we're very thrilled with this. Our seed and plant start giveaways are continuing, and they are fun and exciting events. These numbers are probably very similar to what they have been. It's still just a giant semi-truck of seed potatoes we distribute, but one thing of interest with this is that we're distributing across the river into West Virginia now, due to partnerships with a foundation that we received some funding for called Grow Appalachia. And we've definitely had a lot of fun, again, partnering with the Athens County Public Libraries, but also the Athens OSU Extension Master Gardeners Program that is on site for a lot of those seed giveaways to help answer any questions that people may have about their gardens. The Yeah Kids, the Youth Entrepreneurs at Hope, I believe you're all familiar with that program as a summer job program for disadvantaged youth. One thing that's been unique last year that we plan on continuing is to develop more professional field trips for them so that they understand not just their own production garden and their own value-added product process and vending at the farmers market, but what's going on behind the scenes at other farms and food production companies locally. So this past year we visited the Chester Produce Auction with them, Vestberry Farms, Integration Acres, and Snowville Creamery, and we do plan on continuing that trend. The kids get a lot out of it, and we're hoping that that will eventually lead to potential internships for them in the future, and just better integrate the disadvantaged youth in our community into the local food system. Now, these next few slides are on something that you may not have heard me talk about before because it's a new project and something that I'm very excited to share called Southeast Ohio Food Link. About 2 years ago at an unrelated conference, I met some individuals that work at West Virginia University in the Food Justice Lab, which is part of their geography department. They developed a program called West Virginia Food Link, where they, and this is, we're replicating it in Southeast Ohio in the 10 counties served by our regional food bank, an online resource hub which will map out the locations and all the details related to all of the food pantries in these 10 counties, all of the free meal programs, backpack programs, all of the grocery stores, whether they're small corner stores or big box stores, whether those stores take SNAP, WIC, whether they actually have fresh produce in those stores, as well as all of the data related to the census statistics, Bureau of Labor and Poverty Statistics, free and reduced school lunch rates, basically anything that has anything to do with healthy food access. It's going to be essentially in one website where if I'm an individual looking for food assistance, I can go and find specific details on resources that can help me. If I'm a practitioner writing a grant, I have a one-stop shop for all of the data that I'm going to need, as well as once this project is live, which we're slated to do, we're slated for it to go live in December of this year. We will then host workshops in each of the 10 counties with all of the stakeholder representatives in those communities across the board, not just food pantry coordinators, but anyone who's interested in attending, to teach them how to read and understand the map, because it does have so many multiple layers, and then develop lists of what's missing from that, because a lot of this research will be kind of handpicking and a lot of phone calling, so we may miss a few things, but then we'll be able to, in each county, develop county plans for food access so that the individuals that are serving those communities, the people that are impacted with them, will have a voice in how to make a difference to address these issues. So we're very excited about this because this is an example of the West Virginia's information as well as the list of data sets that are going to go into it. What I'm very excited about is how this will help us break out of our silos and hopefully develop more partnerships and more creative ways of addressing these issues, be able to understand and be more strategic in our programming, as well as our policy. So I'll keep you all abreast of this as it moves forward, but I'm very excited that we will be fully funded to do this thanks to partnership with multiple foundations, and will also, because of this, be hiring a full-time community engagement manager that will oversee this program as well as other community engagement activities within our organization. This is the first time we've had an increase in paid staff in a while. So we've been, really focusing on building our capacity, improving our programs, and trying to develop smarter ways of managing our growth as the needs of our community are continuing. I know that there's a lot of information on these slides, but I'm just putting this up there to demonstrate that we have so many funders coming together to support this work, regional foundations and family foundations. And our board of directors has been really integral in building our financial support, as well as organizational health due to our strategic plan implementation. So our board, I just want to give a shout out to them that they've done a great job with business sponsorship benefits, and we were able to purchase a truck due to the Ohio Health Oblenna Sponsorship Committee. So that's been really wonderful for all of our personal vehicles. We're no longer hauling vegetables in them as much, and really trying to keep a balance in where our income is derived from, as well as how it is being spent, so that the majority of it is going directly into the programs themselves. We're still trying to, as we grow, keeping a lean organization. These are our business sponsors from this past year, and we're just very proud of all of them. A lot of local businesses stepping up to be a part of our mission. And again, so many people involved, over 340 volunteers, as well as our volunteer board of directors, staff, and many, many interns and volunteers from Ohio University and Hocking College. So that concludes my presentation. As you may know, I know our organization has made a request for continued funding, specifically for our AmeriCorps members and Vista Service members that are helping do the direct service and capacity building to keep our organization afloat.
Great. Wow. That's a lot. That's cool. I think people love the knowledge that what we can do and tell our story about what's happening in Athens and the surrounding area, especially when one gets tired of what's going on outside of our area. That's awesome. So I was going to ask you what we can do as a city to help, and you're going to forward the information to City Council and about the request. Do we remember what it was last year?
We did, I believe, 6,000 last year, and this year 8,000.
Okay.
And I do want to state that I'd like to hear who else is supporting the endeavors, because I get it's countywide, it's outside the county, it's 12 counties, it's in West Virginia now as well. And I was kind of shocked to learn today that the county commissioners don't provide any funding.
No.
Have you sought?
I have sought, it's been a couple years since I've reached out to them. Chris Schmiel has as a county commissioner, has been very integral, especially in the development of the the Ross County Donation Station, helping our organization partner with integrated services. He has been great in helping connect our organization more widely.
The reason, Mary, is that it comes, the fund that we've been using all this time, Athens Enhancement, is the fund that we've been advised is no longer going to receive the level of funding that it has in the past. And so, so we're concerned.
Right. And that makes...
When we went into the budget slashing earlier this year, that fund was also cut, and it even cut the normal 6,000 that we have been providing to CFI, much less making up an additional 2,000.
Right. Well, and I agree with the concern that sometimes I think people look to us first, and I would challenge the county commissioners to step up. You know, this does help and benefit everybody. Healthy food means healthy people. So, other questions, Patrick?
Thank you. I'd like to say that I think your organization is one of the finest that I've heard of. And as somebody who used to have a garden down there, I do appreciate it. I do have two questions for you, though. I'm very impressed by what you've done recently and the expansion that you're doing. I was wondering about two things. So is there any effort being made to deal with food that is basically dumped, the food that is expired, so that certain foods can be recovered and used? I know on the internet I see that quite often. And then the second question I had would deal with, it seems like Kroger's and some of the bigger companies are doing this kind of process now. You can order online or order food and they'll bring it to your door. I just wondered, for the less fortunate members of our communities who may not have the transportation available outside of Athens, is there any effort being made to actually bring things to them or centralized to areas where people could pick them up easier?
Right, those are both really excellent questions. So to the first one, in terms of expired foods, the Southeast Ohio Regional Food Bank does pick up from, as far as I know, pretty much all of the major grocery stores in the 10 counties that they serve, or at least they coordinate that with partner food pantries that are in their system. And they can pick up and distribute expired foods so long as it's within a certain number of days. As you may know, those expiration dates, aside from prescription medication and baby food, are developed by the companies. That's not anything that's regulated whatsoever. So they have their own internal policies, I believe, based on Feeding America regulations, most likely. But that food does get picked up and used in the food pantry systems. In terms of the delivery of purchased groceries to low-income households, I don't know. I mean, there are food boxes that are delivered by certain food pantries in our community, particularly the one through the Catholic Diocese. But that's the only one that I know of that takes food directly to people's homes. Yeah, but transportation is constantly a challenge with all of these programs, not even just related to food. Yeah.
Great. Other questions? Michelle?
Thank you. So going back to this funding model, is it possible to, for council to see what everybody else along the way governmentally is chipping into the program? In all the
Certainly.
counties?
In terms of the, let me go back to, so this is the, I don't know if we can bring up the presentation again in terms of the number of foundations that we have serving us. But aside from council funding, we don't directly receive any governmental funding whatsoever. I'm happy to invite myself to a county commissioners meeting, and it sounds like perhaps I'm quite overdue in doing so. When I saw them previously, they just informed me that they didn't have any excess funding for these kinds of programs. But I'm happy to reach out and meet with them again, because I do agree, our programs do primarily serve Athens County, but it is, even beyond that at this point with the donation station program primarily serving these other counties. With the structure for the Food Link project, we are hoping that will not only open doors for our programs, but also open doors for better local governmental involvement in these issues, regardless of whether that financially benefits our organization or not. But I do think that we as community members have a responsibility to be using our privileges, in this case money, to be strategically addressing these issues. So
I would just add that,
yeah.
that I think in the presentation as you present to other organizations, what is excellent about this is you are training people and showing people how to grow their own food and the importance of such, and that's part of your mission.
Absolutely.
And I think from a governmental entity, that's a very positive statement and worthwhile statement. So, I know it's time-based as well for you, and there's only so many hours in a day, but
Sure.
This is an excellent presentation and justification for why maybe some other folks need to get involved or should get involved.
We can also challenge Marietta City Council, put that out there. So, yep, Nelsonville, yep. So, other,
step up to the plate.
yeah. Other questions?
Put the money where your mouth is.
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for your ongoing work and to point out the major impact that this does have on city residents, whether it's through, kids who are learning through the Yeah Kids program, or folks who are gardening up at Carriage Hill, folks who are gardening at the Near East Side Gardens, even the folks who are gardening at the West Side Gardens, which are no longer a part of CFI, because CFI successfully fostered and spun off that group, which is now its own community organization. So, it's a lot of people who have learned skills and have learned autonomy and are transferring those skills to other people. So I think it's a great thing for us to continue to support.
Thank you.
And can you please explain as to where the $8,000 is going to be coming from?
Well, again, we were just looking at the Athens enhancement, so possibly from the Athens enhancement, but once again, that's a funding line that council is well aware that just keeps dwindling.
Right.
And at
So
some
we have
point
to be,
will likely disappear.
it's not our magic pot anymore.
No.
So I think we have to, and Kathy Heck will be here next week to discuss it too. It comes forward. So, okay, great. Any other questions? Great, awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time
Thank
tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you, Councilmember Fall. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel Committee, and that's chaired by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 4 items under the committee. First item is the Athens firefighters and lieutenants contract. award of the conciliator. What I want to talk about tonight is the fact that we acknowledge the receipt of the conciliator's document. I think everybody has a copy on their hard drives. And the way this will proceed is traditionally council approves contracts with our employees. So once we have the final agreement that comes forward, council will then proceed to have an ordinance of approval. A reason I want to do that is it's something the council does. It puts it on the record that we do approve a contract, and it puts it to the public record that it's there. From what I understand, technically we may not be required to pass an ordinance to approve it, which after reading the document from the conciliator, I saw that passage, it was binding. But if 10 years from now someone comes along and says, what happened back in 2017 about that fireman's contract, they'll be able to look in the record and say, well, yeah, I guess they did something, it's there. And as a legislative body, I think it behooves us to do that. So once we have the final document, then we'll introduce an ordinance. And I think we can fast track it since the contract expired back, November 2016? Okay, so it would be nice to get everything settled down so we can apply suspended rules on that. That's all I have on that. Councilmember Pappy?
So I think it's important for the public. So there's been some type of negotiation going on basically since November regarding this contract, back and forth, back and forth. And where you sent out a 26-page document that talks about all the, what's currently we're looking at in terms of the contract. So I just think that's, there is 26 pages here to review, but
It's fast reading.
I like the fact that you are documenting this in such a way that if the public or future council members, whomever, wanted to dig down and look at the historical aspects, I think that's important that people understand that. This just wasn't agreed upon, in a week.
Right.
This has been back and forth for a very long period of time.
If you read the document from beginning to end, it's really a fascinating summary of the whole negotiating method between administration and the union, and back and forth, the give and take, and how it reached the need for a conciliator, and then how the conciliator then, after looking at both sides, made the decision, then explains why that decision has been made that way. I think that's I don't know, I just get a kick out of that sort of thing.
Well, again, it's a form of documentation, and I think that's important.
Right.
Some people would argue, well, why do you need a conciliator or somebody like that? But I think as we move forward,
Right.
and those of us who've been on council and read these documents now for a few years, it's not a bad way to do business.
Right.
From a council member's point of view, in my opinion.
I agree. Any other comment? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Councilman Reisner. Just maybe state publicly that the challenges of conciliation is somewhat undescribable in that there is no real winner, that both sides end up dealing with issues, perhaps.
Compromise.
It's compromise.
Yes, it is compromise. So I think as a community, we may have some work to do as well to move forward. So I won't say a whole lot more than that. Thank you.
Other? Okay, next item, prior year bill for the municipal court. I've been going through my emails on that item, and I really don't have a lot of documentation other than it was a prior year bill. And the administration have any more information on that?
I do not. I have the appropriations in an email that she had requested.
Right.
I was just told it was municipal court
But this is a request for an appropriation and
for a prior,
for a prior year.
For what?
well, it was greater than 3,000, I assume.
A bill.
So that's,
A bill, so there's not much more details?
I have none.
That would be nice to have details.
It certainly would.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
We've not received any. This came through the auditor's office.
And the court has its own way of doing things.
yeah, but
You
they're
know.
still.
Like God, they work mysterious. Their wonders to perform.
Well, it'd just be nice to know what the $3,000 is paying for.
Madam President,
I would just say if we could have the details by Monday night, that would be helpful. We
Yes.
often have prior year bills that come through for insurance or things like that, so yeah, the details would be helpful. Thank you.
I agree. Other appropriations? I see we have appropriation request for training, the CPT training funds. And there seems to be some dispute about whether or not there's money available.
the auditor's been clear that there is no additional funding.
That's my take on it.
Mayor, do you have that figure?
I do. It is,
But there is a possibility of moving money from another line or using other funds to cover that.
or other possibly training funds, but the amount in question is $7,480, which is a rebate, basically, that we receive for professional continuing education, or training, rather, CPT. So we're trying to identify where that money is.
Okay, so do you think by Monday we'll have something together for
We will.
an ordinance? Will there be any need to suspend? Is this something that is,
We can check with the chief. He has identified training that would be specialized to the department. This is the only endeavor he can utilize these funds for under, is it ORC?
It is under ORC. It's under Chapter 109-2-18. And it's interesting. I can read this to council really quickly, if I
Okay.
can find it. And that is that these rebates that come back, each public appointing authority that receives the funds under this section shall keep those funds separate from other funding of the appropriate authority and shall use those funds solely to defray the costs of continuing professional education programs.
so this is a rebate that the city got, is that what you're saying? So now you want to appropriate that rebate to other training? I'm a little confused with that one. You leave the rebate in its own little fund, and then it sits there to pay for other training.
Right.
Is that what you're asking for?
As I understand it, not all training has rebates that come in. There is certain types of continuing professional training where there is refunds, and again, when those refunds come in, then you can use those only for continuing professional training. And so the training that has been identified is rather unique. I'm trying to remember the conversation we had, but basically a kind of an emotion training program for officers. You know, a lot of times we're training them, you know, with a lot of different skill sets, obviously. But there's very little they get from a psychological standpoint in terms of emotion training when you're in various situations. You know, how do you keep things level and keep yourself in check? Not that our police officers don't, but it's a good, you know, training skill to have. So that's one of the training.
With our
professional
population.
Pardon me?
Especially with the population that most of the people are interacting with. Great.
Well, and I think there's a national conversation going on right now about all of that, and we want to be proactive
Very much so.
in our response to that.
And what the chief would also like to do with this level of training is also train the trainer, so that we can continue that and possibly provide training for other law enforcement agencies in our area as well. This is good. again, we're looking for the,
Any other appropriation items?
The appropriations that the auditor sent was for the recent BWC rebate. It's embodied in one of these emails. $95,511.50 in a recent BWC rebate. And then an appropriation to pay Dennis Schwally fees for the short-term loan paperwork of $681.77.
Right, I see that there.
You got that? Okay.
Mhm. Okay. And I guess we'll move on to staffing. I think that's the next item in the auditor's email.
The staffing request has actually come from the auditor, who has basically inquired of our Lands and Buildings Deputy Director to identify how his seasonal and part-time workers, where their work is being conducted. So she is essentially asking that one of the, let me get this right, one of the part-time cemetery maintenance, who also sometimes assists with our landscaper, that his job duties be divided 0.25 here and 0.75 in terms of their hours under cemetery. I guess it's kind of opened a greater discussion amongst us about, does the cemetery have to stand alone? It can't support itself on its own, as opposed to being under Lands and Buildings. When we first went to establish the cemetery, because it was being gifted to us, remember, we didn't have a choice, you get the cemetery. I had checked in with Lancaster, their sister city in terms of statutory and what have you. Their street department oversees all their cemetery activities, but they also have a levy. We don't have a levy, so we're inquiring as to how restrictive do we want to get with identifying these individuals' times. And essentially, in the summer you're mowing, in the late fall you're leafing, or, so.
You mean they have a levy for the cemetery?
they do.
They do.
They do.
So it has
And,
some funding source therefore.
Well, and a cemetery that's active, if you think about it, that you're still selling plots, that there's revenue being generated, so you can have,
Right.
under that scenario, you can have proprietary funding. Well, there's very little that comes in from our cemeteries, from time to time, we can in turn earns, but there's
Right.
just, so there's, again, very little money coming into that.
So we'd like to seek additional discussion regarding this request on the staffing.
Okay.
Basically look at our cemetery.
Possibly, in addition to two seasonal, one individual who would work for the cemetery and the other would work Lands and Buildings and do a lot of all the other.
By season,
Flower.
how long will the season be?
It can't exceed the 120 days. I don't know if you want to stagger those or not.
Okay. Any discussion? Is it a dead issue or not? I guess not.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Reisner. We'll move on to the Transportation Committee, and this is chaired by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you, President Nicely. East State Street US Interchange, project number 288. We need to do an authorization and appropriation, construction and CE funds authorization to advertise and accept bids and sign contracts. We do have a pie chart for folks to see in terms of how we're looking at, which should come up on the screen, folks.
Any minute now.
Any minute now. And that kind of breaks down where all the dollars are coming from, because this is a bit of a complicated ordinance in terms of the funding stream, but I think council members, hopefully that can generate some questions. So there's inter-fund transfers from TIF monies to street rehab, as well as, putting all of this under one ordinance. So we'll give you some time to review that.
If I may,
Yes.
Councilmember Pepe,
Yes.
These numbers are not finalized, they're working towards that. And for example, the OPWC issue 1 money has been awarded.
So it is
And the
400,000?
safety is as well. Mayor, I believe that's right.
No, small cities, it says up there is awarded.
And the safety is also the,
Okay,
we
that's
got
now
2.6.
2.962.
What do I have down here? I wrote $2 million in the federal highway, yeah. But I think we only received about 2.6 in the Fed safety, but we'll check in with Andy as he's going to do that.
Our EPW director said every single dollar will be spent.
Okay.
By the time it's all said and done in terms of getting everything completed.
And there'll likely be TIF dollars being spent, which haven't been spent in a while, so that'll be going towards this project, which would fall under, well, you can see it up there.
Right.
Part of the $750,000 under
Maybe
local.
just remind folks what TIF stands for.
Tax incremental financing.
And then out of our city coffers, a lot of this is grant money.
We have expended some money already, and you recently did that out of 589 for the design engineering.
Right. Right. And that would be the blue up there in the corner, I think. It shows what's available. We haven't spent all that.
No, not
No.
yet, but we have spent some.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have those figures.
Right.
And as you know, it's over a 2-year project. But this is to get it started so that we can build the sidewalks and do the repavement this year.
This summer.
Because.
And the restriping of the lanes.
It will not, and Andy doesn't believe he can get it through another year.
Right.
Another winter.
I would also say that there's still conversation in the community regarding the bicycle lanes on State Street and safety. And recently, many of us are aware that there was a 3-foot law passed by the state legislature. I've been in conversation with the law director regarding this. And
3-foot law meaning,
3-foot passing law.
like vehicles passing cyclists.
Right. And so, where it's not very specific, is that the tip of the handlebar, where it does that? I think most people kind of think that, but it doesn't say that specifically in the state law. So, with the bike lanes that we have and everything, will that continue to provide safety for bikers and drivers of cars and that kind of thing?
Now, how wide are the bicycle lanes?
4 foot
So
with a 2-foot gutter.
So they're
So
5
we're
foot.
talking
That's
6
6
foot
feet.
of space.
okay.
But keep in mind, in the gutter is the storm drains. Those really aren't friendly with bicycles.
No.
But that said, there's a 6-foot dedicated space for bicycles. I would contend, and again, I'm not familiar with the law. I'm familiar with the essence of the law, the 3-foot rule. But I would also contend that or question whether that applies to a dedicated bike lane that's 4
Right.
foot in nature.
Right.
As opposed to where I see that law, again, this is my opinion, is where I really do see that law is, I'll use Morris Avenue as an example, to where it doesn't have a dedicated bike lane and someone's traveling down, and that you give 3 foot of berth to a bicycle, a cyclist that is riding in that area, or anywhere that doesn't have a dedicated bike lane.
So most people, I think, if you look at both sides of the issue, would say with a dedicated bike lane, it's probably safer for the cyclist. So one of the other things, we have a couple pictures that can be brought up of a before and after shot of a city, very congested city street. So you see on the left, the before, pretty much vehicles are wherever they want to be, whether it's taxis or whatever. And then the after shot is a more organized, in my opinion, control of transportation, multimodal, pedestrian, everything.
Bicycle, everything, yeah.
I think, there's a bus lane over on the far right. Obviously, that won't be the case. But if you also notice, I'm guessing that those lanes on the right side, the after picture, look a little narrower than the ones on the left. I could be wrong, but, which is some of what we're doing at State Street, which is to slow traffic as well. So we've really been trying to investigate. This actually, these pictures come out of a Journal for American Medical Association. So anyways, there's just another option. So other council members? Member McGee?
Just a question for the mayor. You indicated that this is being paid for by TIF, and you explained what that is, I believe, but could you tell us where that money is coming from? Is it from a general tax fund? Is it being taxed for some specific reason? Could you explain it just briefly?
Sure, I can. As I understand it, the money is being generated by the property value appreciation that has occurred within the TIF area, and the TIF is defined. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't give you the actual from where to where, but it's East State Street, and it's where we've seen a lot of development take place already with Lowe's and with Walmart. When I say development, we're getting businesses in that area, and as those businesses develop and that property, the value goes up, the taxes, a portion of those taxes go back into the TIF to continue, to allow us to continue improvements of East State Street. I think that President Nisley may know more. Was it 2003 that the TIF began?
I don't remember the exact year, but I do know that it's almost like a proprietary fund in a sense for improvements to East State Street. And yes, they were at the time that some of the improvements were made to businesses, retail businesses along East State. So there have been other years previously where we have appropriated some of those TIF funds back to improvements that we have made on East State. So we're continuing, in a sense, we're practicing again what we've been doing in the past with that TIF funding to help provide some of the funds for this project.
It was 2002. So 2002, and to give you an idea, this is significant because what we've been doing as a city is allowing that TIF fund to grow, and then once there's enough money in there for different improvements, then we can go ahead and use that. And again, it has to be used in the TIF itself. So since 2002 through 2016, the cumulative amount of TIF money that's come in is $6,013,764.50. So it's a significant way to recapture some revenue that goes back into continually improving that area. Again, a sidewalk improvement qualifies, a lot of things, but it has to be, again, within the TIF defined area to where you can do projects. You couldn't take that TIF money and say, okay, let's go ahead and apply this to Stimson Avenue roundabout. Sure, can't do it.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Costas?
Yes, if we could go back to that image that we had from New York City. What was really interesting about this is that, look at what I was kind of interested about was the lane reduction. So basically my guess is this street, even though it looks like it's gone down from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lanes down to, is that just 2 with parking?
Three.
Looks like three.
Okay, with the bus lane?
Yeah.
So 4.
My guess is that probably carries about the same amount of traffic as the street that isn't designated to allow those different modes of transportation to travel at the speeds that they're designed to to travel at. And then the second thing I wanted to speak to was the 3-foot law, and basically my understanding is that it's a safety feature for cyclists, because right now cyclists do not have. There's been instances where a cyclist has been hit when they've been riding to the right of the white line, because they're comfortable riding in the shoulder, but they're not technically on the road. So a driver can strike a cyclist and they don't get cited. So with this 3-foot law, it's pretty obvious that you violated the 3-foot law if there's a strike. So that, I think, is the biggest safety feature for that
Sounds like
law.
it's clarifying whether or not there was a violation.
Correct, yeah. I mean, I don't think a police officer is going to be able to determine from the center of the bike out to the handlebar whether or not it's 3 foot or not. But if you have an unsafe pass that looks aggressive, you know, there is some enforcement allowable now by the state of Ohio.
And another, in discussing this with the law director, every form of transportation is allowed on our roads. So again, this is, I would say, the 3-foot rule is a safety feature added, or a bike lane as a safety feature added for a segment of the transportation, such as a biker. So that's that. And then one additional thing I wanted to mention that I think that we've been confused about. In the city of Athens, there is only one place, and that is in the Uptown Business District, where we do not allow bikes on sidewalks. Bikes on sidewalks are allowed on East State, on Morris Avenue, on other places in this town, Union Street. It's only in the central business district in the uptown area that we do not, because of the amount of pedestrian traffic, obviously, that we do not allow bikes. So if you feel more comfortable, if you have a child on a bike, you can be on a sidewalk. So,
With caution
of
to other
course.
users.
So, yeah, of course, you're going to have to share it like you would on the bike trail. You can't mow over walkers or joggers or dog walkers on a bike. So I just think that's an important thing to put out there as well. Member Costas?
Yes, and now with this East State Street design, that sidewalk will have a 6-foot buffer from traffic, which will make it feel a lot more comfortable for everybody to travel on that. And another, well, I saw the engineers putting the speed hoses down, you know, and so I know that they've already measured the rate of traffic, the speed of traffic, right, what it is right now. I don't know if we have that we probably haven't heard that information yet, but I know we'll test that after this design is done. But I stopped and I talked with the engineers because I just saw them out there. And
Are you talking about our people or
the Columbus firm?
The Columbus firm, okay.
And they told me that Morris Road in Columbus, which is 7 lanes of traffic, 45 miles an hour speed limit, is going through the same redesign. The lanes are getting narrowed down to 11 foot, and they're doing bike lanes on the sides. So this is a tried and true process.
Member Cochran?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that it would be helpful for citizens to have a schedule of what they can expect for the rest of the summer, construction-wise, and note that traffic volumes have been increasingly heavy on State Street because of the exit closures and even going over up Madison and over Terrace to Columbus Road. So folks need to be reminded to observe speed limits, and having an idea of what's coming next would be useful.
We're receiving the same concerns, and we're actually starting to look at some of the areas that you're talking about, in particular where Joneswood and then joins up with Terrace, but also with Columbia, and looking at that area in particular with traffic flow through there. I want to go back real quick, if I can, to the sidewalk. You know, Member Pappy is correct in that the majority of the city sidewalks, it is permissible to ride bikes. However, my only word of caution about that for people deciding that I'm going to go ahead and start riding my bicycle on a sidewalk is we live in a new era where everybody has one of these, and often people have earbuds in and they're not paying attention to what's going on because I am on a sidewalk. And so my only word of caution is for cyclists, and this is kids to grown-ups, that you're going to have to be that defensive bicycle rider because it's likely that someone isn't hearing you. Even with the allotted, which I learned, that it has to have a bell on your bicycle to warn people that that's part of the equipment that a bicycle needs to have. But again, if someone's listening to to music or carrying on a conversation, they're likely not to hear that. So that's just my word of caution about cycling on city sidewalks. Plus, they're narrow. I don't know the exact width of sidewalks, but I imagine they're 4 foot to 5 foot in some cases, unless you're uptown to where they're 11 feet. But anyway, that's a whole different story. So just, I needed to get that out there, that, you know, there's a level of caution to even be had on sidewalks.
Any other council members on this East State Street topic? Funding, pretty clear for the most part. I guess we'll have finer numbers next week when we actually have the written ordinance.
Yes.
And our clerk of council will have it all put together for us. Thank you. All right. Next topic is West Union Sidewalk Extension. We've been speaking on this project for a couple years now. It was identified as one of the areas that needed to be expanded. There's never been a sidewalk there, and so this is from Blick Avenue down towards where the bike trail crosses Union Street. So Blick Avenue is sort of, if you can think of this, near Larry's Doghouse.
Correct.
So from there down to where and there are several parking lots and things like that people can walk through, but there are also properties where there is absolutely no sidewalk.
A great example is the Highland Hotel. Which
The Highland Hotel has a beaten down path at this point, but they need a sidewalk. So this was identified as a Community Development Block Grant, CDBG project, and we are moving forward with that legislation.
We still can.
Why we still can.
Because that's one of the things that's on the cutting block.
Yeah.
It's the CDBG.
I think we identified a cost to that. In my head, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was around $70,000 for some, I don't know if it's that or more, but.
I think you were tracking the CDBG grant component portion of it.
Yeah,
and
I
that,
probably am.
You know, I estimate a little lower, maybe at 65. That
Okay.
Andy is still working on final design. He believes it'll come in somewhere a little over 100,000.
Okay.
But it's a reimbursable, so you really have to appropriate the entire amount anyway.
And then we are reimbursed, and the city ends up paying,
Well, that's the ceiling that we get out of CDBG, and it's interesting. We did get notification that CDBG is now going biannually. Supposedly, though, double the amount will be available, so every 2 years. It might work out better in terms of
Okay.
planning for some projects.
okay. So, okay, Member Butler?
Thank you. I just want to express my support for us moving forward with this project. I know that Public Works Director Stone has identified this a number of years ago on one of our street tours as a wish list project. Again, I think this is really valid and important for that part of town. There's a number of businesses over there, Veterans Affairs.
New housing.
New housing, the Athens Photographic Project, all walks of life, able-bodied, disability. This is going to be beneficial for our community on that side of town. So I support this. Thank you.
Mayor?
I want to echo what Member Butler said, and to add that this was identified by the Commission on Disabilities several years ago as being, a must-do project just for accessibility alone. Because as it stands right now, there are some sidewalks, but you have to weave back and forth across West Union to use those sidewalks. It's not safe.
So, Member Costas?
Do I dare say that this is a complete street? This is making it more accessible to more people in our city. So I would say this is once again, lending itself to being a complete street project, which is something that we always want to do whenever we do an upgrade or a redo on a street.
Well, and I will say the bike and pedestrian plan did identify Union Street as needing a bike lane, especially since there is a bike crossing to the bike path down there. And when the when the street was redone a couple of years ago, it didn't quite happen in terms of the striping. But that was identified in the bike and pedestrian plan as a place to have a bike lane. Whether we could do that in the future when we restripe or repave, I think that probably needs to be looked at again, because it is an access point back into the business uptown area off of the bike trail. And I will also say that the county is putting out a map, our visitor and bureau, that talks about the brew pubs and where they're located and how you might be able to cycle to some other establishments, such as the Hot Cider House on the west side and that. So eventually, I would say that we probably should have some type of bike lane or something if we could work that in on Union Street. So we are encouraging that kind of business development. Member Costas.
I do recognize that every street can't have a bike lane on it, so depending on the width and everything else, I'm just happy we're getting a sidewalk.
There we go. Mayor?
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, there's some interesting challenges, as some of you may know, with West Union, especially that section, you know, major water line running through there. The other thing too is the public right-of-way, as our city engineer has indicated, is rather strange down there. It leans more to the north side of the street as opposed to the south side of the street, plus of the ownerships of property on the south side of the street. But it's challenging. But in the future, we can certainly explore some possibilities.
Okay, thank you. We're done.
Thank you, Member Pappy. We'll move on to City and Safety Services Committee, and that's chaired by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Nisley. We just have 3 items on the agenda this evening. First is the water treatment plant improvement. Second, generators and safety enhancements. And third is the Canaanville land with some lease agreements discussion. So I'm going to lean on the administration for some highlights here and hot points. Fortunately, we also have some good news to share, and I'll let the administration expand on this regarding the water treatment plant improvements, specifically in the vein of solar panels. So we were talking about solar panels earlier this evening, and there's discussion that the new let's see here, I'll let you guys address that, the updates to the loan, specifically with the solar panels.
Yeah, the solar panels is going to add cost to this, but in terms of having solar panels behind the meter, we also see that there'll be a savings. You know, metering, getting behind the meter means that we're not paying for some of our electric from AEP or whomever on the electric side. Andy Stone also reached out to the director of OEPA, our Southeastern Ohio director, to see if this is something that could be rolled into the project under the loan, and the loan.
This is the water supply revolving loan.
Correct. Yeah, which again is going to be $6,942,000. And if I'm not mistaken, the solar was right around $400,000, but again, over the life of the solar panels, which, you know, these days is exceeding 25 years, that we would see our return on investment within 15 years or less on those solar panels, which is good. Plus, again, it's kind of getting back to the NOPEC, SOPEC conversation earlier this evening. Is ultimately it's you know, generating our own renewable energy that's feeding into our own precious water plant.
And if you recall, we'd like to start that through the dollar amounts. We're having a 60% design meeting this week, and so those are yet to be finalized, but we should be able to meet it and capture this year. And this is phase one that includes the electrical safety upgrades as well.
Thank you. You're aware, Councilmember Khan.
I'm not sure if you were ready for
No,
questions, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know what size of an array we're talking about and what percentage of the power for the wastewater treatment plant we expect that to generate.
Oh, what percentage? Is that what you asked? Percentage of the overall energy
And
use?
how many megawatts are we talking about?
I can get you those numbers by next Monday in terms of the percentage, but what I can tell you is 278 kilowatts is what the solar array will generate, which is substantial. There was a couple different versions that we were looking at. One was much less. It was just north of 100 kilowatts, but in looking at land available that is ours, that we can use to put a larger array, we feel that it's more cost effective in the long run for us to go with the 278 kilowatt generation, which is not commercial energy. You know, that when you get up into that range, you're talking things, you know, plants that are producing 750K or you're in the mega, you know, 1 megawatt of production when you get up into commercial. But this will be substantial. In looking at some of the concept drawings that we've seen from EMHT, is that it looks substantial in terms of having this array down there at the water treatment plant.
Strand.
Yeah, Strands in general. That's correct. Thank you.
Is it? Okay.
Any other questions for the administration regarding this issue? Anything else the administration wants to add to this?
The only thing I'd like to add is that it's, for the city, I think it's exciting to think about, you know, finally truly getting behind the meter with a project. And I think that's something that we should continue to explore as a city as we move forward with major renovations to facilities.
Thank you. Next on the agenda this evening is a discussion about generators, specifically to the city building, where we're at right now, as well as the law administration building. I'm guessing, the administration, correct me, it's similarly, when you think about the derecho that we encountered a few years back, I mean, it proved just how challenging and vital it may be to lose electricity to sectors of the city that are important in our safety and well-being and maintenance. And so thinking about what happens in the city building, what happens in the law building, to know that there's a possibility of us pursuing backup power in the form of generators is essential. When we think about IT, we think about the computers, and we think about networking, all the safety issues and factors that come into play. Having a backup power system is important. So there's discussion here looking at diesel power generators versus natural gas. So a 600 kilowatt diesel generator, approximately 272,000 versus a 350 kilowatt natural gas generator, which would be for the law office building, and then a 250 kilowatt system of natural gas for City Hall. The first estimate, the $272,000 for diesel, would be for both buildings, am I correct?
That's correct.
Versus the pursuit of the natural gas generators, which would be smaller generators, which would be distinctly focused for each building or designated specifically for its respective building. Questions and comments or more information from the mayor's office?
Well, I mean, you hit the cost. I mean, this is a cost estimate. We know where about $205,000 can come from for generators. We're still going to have to explore where the remaining 60,000 plus would come from for this. But I do want to share, I think your example of the derecho is a good one. I'll give you one that is equally critical or crippling, which we just experienced, a month and a half ago, which is when we lost 3 AEP telephone poles behind the city building, and the city was without power for 3 days. And along with that, you know, with power in general, whether it's derecho created or it's an accident to where a pole decides to give it up and fall over, is that, you know, we've got critical city infrastructure that is exposed, you know, and it's the servers. We also have personnel who are working these buildings, and this one in particular, you know, when the telephone poles went down, you know, people had to vacate the building. Had it been darker at night and there were people in here, how are they gonna get out? You know, with limited light, I don't know that everyone carries a flashlight with them, is one thing. The other thing is the amount of time, and there's costs associated with this, obviously, that our IT director, David Dudding, spends a lot of time running around having to reset the servers or whatever after there's been a power blip to this building. He also has to do it on occasion over in the law building. So having something finally to where we're protecting some of our valuable resources in terms of IT infrastructure, that we're able to do it with these or one, really, you know, looking cost effectively, you know, saving $120,000 by going with a diesel generation, which also from a maintenance, as we understand it, this came from Claypool, who did the estimate on this. Claypool, maintenance on these generators, there's less maintenance with a diesel generator than there is with a gas generator, but.
And greater efficiency. And we recognize this has to be bid. We just asked for a proposal to get an idea of what kind of needed to have in place in order to bids for this work, so.
Thank you for the mayor's office to help get us to this point in the discussion. I'll call on council members for some comments here. Councilman Reisner?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. If you go diesel, where are you going to store a day's worth of fuel? I mean, where are we going to put the tanks and stuff, and how are we going to safeguard that there won't be a...
Well, currently the tanks are on the roof of the law building, and because it's a diesel generator over there right now that only provides power to the police department.
And that one failed during the duration.
A portion of the police department, thank you. But it would be stored at ground level, down somewhere within the design. And we also have, I just learned this, the things you learn on a daily basis, is that we actually have diesel hauling in the city. So, you know, just to continually pump into them, those would be where we're filling from, as opposed to leaving out here, you know, 2,000 gallon diesel fuel tank or whatever to power it for extended periods of time. But from what I understand, the diesel units will run for 2 days with its dedicated fuel tank associated with it. So then we would have to cycle through and keep it filled.
Right. But one of the problems that happened during the derecho was that because it was so universal, fuel supplies were exhausted very quickly. You couldn't get the fuel out of the ground or out of the tanks because there was no power to supply them. So unless, I mean, thinking worst case scenario, if that happened again, then would a 2-day supply be adequate?
They told us it was a day and a half. The rest of us that were out for a week,
With the
a day and a
derecho.
half up here.
But you raise a great point. I mean, I understand the intent of your question. It's something that I have to ponder
And with
over
gas being
too.
different, is that what you're asking?
Well, I think natural gas is virtually uninterruptible. I mean, yeah, occasionally a line will go down and there's a leak and they come in, they repair it and stuff. In my lifetime, I've experienced one major gas break, and that was when I was 6 years old in MacArthur, and something seriously happened to the supply, and it was out for a week, and it was in the winter. It was cold. But that was 60 years ago.
We could bid them both. We could ask for both and see what we get in terms of efficiency and cost.
You know, well, be that as it may, but my other question was, we have other facilities that are critical in the city. I know the fire departments have their backup. And I think with the water treatment plants, they're having backup generators also. Is that correct?
they have a port, not to operate the entire plant. We have the hookup that's
Right.
being in this, the upgrades we'll have the actual connector to Ohio University's big mother
I'm assuming the solar
generator.
panels would help a lot in that case
Hopefully.
too. Other facilities within the city that we're looking at?
Community center?
Long-term?
Oh,
We
community
did just
center
get the
just
meeting.
received the generator
Right.
that came from the wastewater treatment plant, so we repurposed that, and that's in play over there. The wastewater treatment plant has a generator.
How about the city garage, you think, those guys are pretty critical too for the equipment breaks?
I don't know that they have a generator down there, but,
I don't know either, I'm just asking.
well, we have generators, smaller generators that we're able to take out to our lift stations or pumping stations, so we've got that on hand that we can dispatch those quickly if we need
Just seems
to.
like if we're thinking along these lines, we should be looking at everything, prioritizing.
We have, and that's why we're coming to you for the law administration building in City Hall.
Okay.
You may remember that part of the perfection, looking at energy efficiencies, a generator was in that as well, for the city building.
Thank you. I believe we have a few more questions or comments. Councilmember
Jeff
Costas.
answered mine.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I guess some of my first questions would be, we just went through the process of changing over to LEDs, and we're saving 40% on our energy bill. So I don't know if the city has already done that with these fluorescents that we have in here, but I would think that we could lessen our energy that's being spent on this building if we haven't already done those kind of upgrades to begin with. What are some of the other things? Oh, the post office has a diesel-powered generator. So when the power goes out on Stimson Avenue, the first thing you get is this big plume of black smoke. So the whole street gets coal rolled, and then it's a little bit noisier, and it does have this special smell that some people really like in their vehicles. So, so that's something to consider with the uptown. I mean, I understand this is an emergency area, but I would really be curious to know what that gas one is. My neighbor has a gas-powered one, and it sounds like a lawnmower that runs 24 hours a day, but still it sounds like a lawnmower. And then the last thing. I would argue that everybody carries a flashlight with them at this day and age. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember.
If you've been able to plug in.
Other questions or comments regarding anything else from the administration? Thank you. Last item this evening is regarding the Cannonville land and discussion regarding potential for lease agreements. Again, I'll lean on the administration to update us. Thank you.
Well, if you recall, we went through the process to declare 25 acres as no longer meeting a city purpose and put that out to bid, and essentially wound up rejecting all proposals. So now the city engineer has come forward requesting this.
Right, which would be authorizing a lease of 14.4 acres.
Give a picture.
This is there we go. To orient everybody, you can see State Route 50 up there. But again, this is the northeast portion of the city-owned property at Cannonville that is no longer useful for spreading sludge. It was also used to haul a lot of the residue from the wastewater treatment plant renovation that took place. So there's also some waste debris out there that further complicates this piece of land as it exists. Along with the same Ohio Revised Code ordinance or title that speaks to the selling of property that the city owns, there's also a section in there that speaks to leasing those property or leasing property. And so it is permissible under Ohio Revised Code. So this will, again, likely go out to the highest bidder to go the route or the leasing route with this particular piece of property. And then the monies that come in from the lease will be used dedicated to purchasing land elsewhere for sludge application. Or, I mean, it's not in Andy's, but it's certainly something that the city engineer and I have been discussing for a while, and that is that if Athens County were to, some entity or the county or whoever, maybe Athens Hocking Recycling Center, if they were to build a methane digester, sludge can be hauled to a methane digester to make methane and produce energy as well. And so that's something that could also be explored to where, if that were to happen, maybe that lease money goes towards us hauling the sludge out to a methane digester. But again, that's a big if there were to be a methane digester built somewhere within Athens County.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council?
Where is the closest methane digester?
The closest one that I'm familiar with is in Zanesville, and it is a commercial energy production. It's a big production they have up there. It's called Quasar. There was actually a field trip. I wasn't able to make it. County Commissioner Schmiel kind of put that together to go and see a commercial grade methane digester and how it works, and it was interesting. It was interesting to see because they even had methane filling stations that buses that use that can run on gas can fuel up as well. And then it produces fertilizer at the end of the day. Some of the byproduct that comes out of the methane digester is suitable for yard and garden application.
That's only 40 miles.
Anyone else from council? Mayor's office? Thank you, President Reiser. That concludes this section.
Okay, and that concludes our meeting tonight. We adjourn at 8:42 p.m. and our next meeting will be Monday night, May 15th. Thank you.